Thanks. I joined the Labour Party when I was 16. I've been a union member, a Labour Party member, and former union official with NUP. And I believe very strongly in the representation of trade unions within the political system. And I think that the trade union link with Labour is something that I see as very, very important. No other party, certainly represented in Parliament, has that degree of trade union link. Do I disagree with the Labour Party frequently? Do I believe things can be achieved within the Labour Party? Yes, otherwise I wouldn't be in it. And there are, even in the 97 to 2010 government, there were some significant social changes in Britain on childcare arrangements, on age of consent, criminalisation of racism, and a number of other things that I think were very good, not to mention minimum wage and issues like that. Do I work with other MPs from other parties? Yes. I work with Liberal Democrats to some extent, Julian Huppert and one or two others, on anti-war things, with Caroline Lucas, yes, on anti-war stuff as well, and also with some Conservatives. I don't agree with them, but we did form an informal alliance ahead of the Syria vote. Now, the Syria vote was actually something that was very important, because not only was it the first time the Prime Minister had recalled Parliament that I can remember during a recess to get permission to go to war, might not have been the first, but I think it was, and also Parliament voted absolutely against, not by a big majority, but against, and the Labour Party did vote against the military intervention in Syria, which I'm not saying it was an easy thing to achieve. It wasn't. There was a great deal of argument and lobbying within the party, because there are some elements in the party that are very pro-interventionist and pro-war. They're still there. We did, however, manage to get a position where Labour MPs voted against, and I think that is a turning point in British recent political history, that we decided not to intervene. And so, is life in the Labour Party difficult and frustrating? Of course it is. Can we make any difference in the party? It's our party. If we walk away from it, if we walk away from Labour, what's left? Who's pleased? Who's going to be happy about that? I get very angry with a lot of things. I get very angry with PFI. I get very angry with marketisation. I get very angry with TTIP and all those issues. I work for my constituency. I work to try and achieve change in those things. On the point Riyadh made about Iraq, Syria and other issues, you're quite right. The Gulf War of 91 and then the sanctions period in Iraq was an appalling period. I was one of only 17, I think, MPs to vote against the bombing of Baghdad in 1991. And the sanctions period ended up killing 500,000 Iraqis. The use of depleted uranium in southern Iraq ended up with cancers that are still being suffered by the people there. And the breakup of Iraq is certainly happening before our very eyes. And I have a very large Kurdish community in my constituency. I've got a great deal of sympathy for the Kurdish people, and indeed was one of those involved in taking up the issue of Halabja in 1988. Again, I was, I think, one of only 2 MPs that took it up, and was told to shut up by others because I was damaging Britain's arms trade with Iraq. Amazing, isn't it? The bombing went on. It didn't stop at the end of the ceasefire, the Bush-inspired ceasefire. It carried on, and the Iraq war then came later on. Likewise, what's going on in Syria. Now, I have no brief whatsoever for the Syrian government or other governments within the region and the abuse of human rights that's going on there. But ISIL didn't come out of nowhere, and it came out of a sense of anger at what the West has done. That's why it gets some support, and it comes out of the growth of resources. If you think back, how did the Taliban grow? 1979? The West decided to arm them because they were opponents of the Soviet Union, and we end up with the Taliban. Exactly the same thing is happening before our very eyes in the whole region now. We have to start looking at the causes of war. Otherwise, we tend to repeat those mistakes again and again and again. And if we don't deal with the issue of the rights of Palestinian people, don't deal with the understanding of what different cultures and diversity of culture is all about, then we just going to make the same mistakes again, end up spending more and more money on more and more wars and more danger all around the world as a result of it. There is not peace brought about by NATO bombs. Democracy doesn't arrive at the end of a bomb. Democracy arrives because people demand it and get it for themselves within their own community, and I think we should be a bit more sanguine about this, and I wish the public and the Labour movement as a whole spent a lot more time thinking about these issues of international policy and what goes on around the world, because it has a massive effect on our lives and on our society, whether we like it or not. Our anti-terror laws, wherever they come from. Our expenditure levels, wherever they come from. David Cameron himself, to finish on this point, did admit that there is a cost to be paid in social spending in Britain on the £34 billion a year we spend on armaments. Well, if we saved a few billion on armaments, we could get rid of PFI in the health service and get rid of an awful lot of other things that way. There is an opportunity there. I think Bernard wants to add a word to this. Okay, I'm not sure whether in your question you mean Labour Party members or MPs or voters, but I guess in a sense it applies to all three groups. What are their views? I think the public view on interventions has become extraordinarily sceptical. There was a majority against Iraq intervention, and that majority got bigger the more the intervention went on. Amongst Labour Party members, I think there has always been a very large group, if not a majority, who are very sceptical about nuclear weapons and about interventionist policies. And amongst Labour MPs, approaches and attitudes have changed a great deal, particularly since Iraq of 2003. As I said, we did get a vote against the intervention in Syria. As to the other question, yes, the governments of all sorts have sought to exterminate or attack minorities. Saddam Hussein did it against Kurdish people. Government of Syria has done it against other minorities. The government of Turkey has done it against Kurdish and Armenian minorities. There are quite a lot on that. Have things changed in many countries? Yes. I mean, in Turkey, the situation is light years different to what it was 10, 15 years ago. Are we justified in intervening to bring about change? I suppose you can never say never, but I just find the whole notion that there should be some kind of God-given right of the wealthiest and most powerful nations in the world to intervene in certain places, where they intervene for largely commercial arms or natural resources gain. Nobody calls upon the West to intervene in the Congo to protect human rights in the Congo, even though the loss of life at the hands of militias funded by mining companies and mining interests is huge indeed. I don't think the UN is going to sanction bombardment, and I don't think the Western countries are going to go to the UN to do that. My guess is the most likely outcome is going to be some supplies that are given to the Kurdish regional government in Iraq, some supplies that are given to the Iraqi government, and one hopes there's going to be a great deal of pressure put on Saudi Arabia about the supply of weapons to the ISIL forces. And I indeed have helped the government along yesterday by tabling a whole series of questions on supply of arms to Saudi Arabia, what happens to them and what end user examination takes place. We can't and shouldn't try and solve every problem everywhere in the world. We should support those people that are trying to solve it around the world and be quite sanguine about what Western military intervention actually means all around the world. Look at where we do it, look at why we do it, and look at what the results of it are. It's not an easy situation, it's not a great situation, but there has to be a different way than just intervention.
Thank Jeremy for his very stimulating and thought-provoking contributions. because we were in such a rush when we started, I forgot to give you the full rundown of Jeremy's great biography in this area. Would anyone like me to run through? Well, I think we should embarrass him on his way out the door. So I think, you know, as well as being the Labour MP for Islington North, which most people know, Jeremy is also chair of the human rights organisation Liberation. He's chair of Stop the War Coalition. He's vice chair of CND. We're not sure why he's not chair of CND as well, but he is chair.
We've got a very good chair.
He is chair of Labour CND, so obviously he's busy there, and he's also patron of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And I'm sure there's a hell of a lot more we could mention, but I think, you know, that's why we invited him here today as one of our lead speakers. And although, you know, he has got to rush back to his constituency because of this event that's come up, we're delighted that he came. We're very grateful. And as I said at the beginning, many MPs, I think the vast majority of MPs, wouldn't have come down to Brighton, travelled 50, 60 miles to spend an hour, you know, roughly an hour in a meeting with people who can't even vote for them, but Jeremy did, and we thank him for that.